One. And welcome everybody to another episode of Smart Money Circle. I'm your host, Adam Sarhan. With me today is a very special guest, Mark Adams, who's president and CEO of SGH. Ticker symbol is SGH as well. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
My pleasure. So Mark, I always like to begin. Can you tell us a little about your journey and how you got to where you are today, please?
Absolutely. So I grew up back east and I went to undergrad at Boston College. And then I worked in the information technology space at a company called NCR, which is kind of a blue chip American company, been around for years. I mean, I'm a century. NCR stands for National Cash Register. And they were just a great place to go train and start my career in sales and marketing. And I was there for about 5 years and then decided to go back and get my MBA, which I did in Boston. I got my MBA at Harvard and got out of Harvard in 95. So, I had done all the traditional steps, big company, go to undergrad and grad school and all that stuff. And I basically lived in the Northeast. And so when I got out of business school, I had AT&T, who had acquired NCR, was going to pay for my business school. And you have to stay for 3 years if you do it and all that stuff. And I left business school thinking, man, I've never left. I mean, I think the world ends in Pennsylvania or something like that. And I've never left. So
That's funny.
I'm gonna go try something. I had an opportunity to go open Latin America.
Oh, nice.
For a pretty hot technology company, Creative Technology. They're the company that made Sound Blaster and the audio inside the computer, first ever audio. And then take that technology to Latin America. And so I moved down after graduation from business school, moved to Coral Gables and opened Latin America, and it was on fire. It was great.
Nice.
And it was such a new experience for, again, a kid in the Northeast to go do that, and didn't know Spanish, didn't know Portuguese. And somehow I convinced the founder from Singapore that I could get it all done. He's like, well, there's no business there anyway, so you might as well go try it for a year. And then 3 years later, we added up to $150 million business, which was a big deal. It was the fastest growing part of the company at the time. So he came down and kind of said, okay, I was wrong. You're great. Come on out. And so that I came out here to run the Americas. I'm out in California now at the turn of the century in 2000. So, through that stuff, I learned a lot, like take some chances. There's never a straight path. Everyone thinks that, and I tell this to kids all the time when I interview them or I speak at Santa Clara University in a couple of their courses, and everyone's journey is different. Mm-hmm. And as parents, we all want to have a cookie cutter, this is the right way to do it. Well, I don't know that there is a right way. I mean, the right way might be the way you're on, and stop being so judgmental and critical of yourself on the journey. And so I tell stories. It's just so funny. So I got recruited to go to Lexar Media, mm-hmm. Which was another consumer company in the memory space, though. They make Lexar was very big in the photography cards when cameras went to digital, mm-hmm. and then USB storage devices early on, very early on. Yeah. And so I said no because the stock had been on a run, blah, blah, blah. I went through this whole process and I said, hey, call me back someday when your stock's down at $5 because your stock's been on a run. I don't really want to join at the wrong time. Right. He calls me back on my birthday.
Oh, nice.
Which is 5/5, May 5th.
Yeah.
And the stock was at $5. And he said to me, hey, I did my job. I got the stock down to $5. Will you join? So I ended up joining there. Fast forward, Micron buys Lexar. And then the Micron CEO, Steve Appleton, I don't know if you know his story, but he passed away in a plane crash later on in my career. But great guy. He kind of recruited me to stay on at Micron. And I was the only sales and marketing executive on a team of engineers, and because they're a big, deep semiconductor company. Yeah. So it was all engineers and R&D guys and this sales and marketing guy, Mark Adams. They don't know me. I'm an outsider. And I worked my way up to get to be president of Micron. Wow. And we just had a great run. We consolidated the memory industry and the company did really, really well. Unfortunately, I had a health problem in 2015 where I had to step away for a couple of years in the workforce and deal with that. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, my wife had breast cancer. A month after I stepped down. So we're dealing with this in our family. So again, another example though, here I am, I'm about to be named CEO of Micron because that was in cards, and they bought me a house in Idaho, and that was all playing out. And then, but God said, no, we're going to go a different way here, right?
Different way,
So,
yeah.
you talk about life lessons, and you talked, earlier, and as we think about like what you're trying to get out of these type of calls,
Yeah.
man, I heard a great expression: if you ever want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah,
I
seriously.
thought I had it all figured out, but not so much. So, and then I took some time off. I joined the board of Cadence and Seagate,
Mhm.
two big technology companies here in Silicon Valley, and
Yep.
I've been doing that. And then a private equity firm kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, would you be willing to help us on a look at a acquisition?" This was at the time Cree,
Mhm.
and they have a holding company called Smart Global Holdings, which is really what the acronym SGH stands for. They
Mhm.
said, "You want to come join? Help us through this acquisition process." And as we spent time together, they go, "Why don't you run this thing? We're trying to get out of the position," because they were in it for 10 years, which is a lot longer than private equity guys, as stay
Yeah.
in these things. Why don't you take it? You've got great public company experience. Why don't you finish the acquisition and put it into SGH and kind of help this company take off? And I've been at it 2 years. I've had a blast. It's kind of been a fun operating role, but also we've been pretty active on the M&A side. The company's doing great. And so that's probably longer than you wanted, but a summary of how I moved throughout my career.
No, I absolutely love it. I'm on the board of a local breast cancer charity, so I'm very, that touches me to my core as well. So I love that. I mean, I can go in a million different directions here, but I'm going to try my best to stay focused here. What a great story, and I love what you said about how things go in different directions. And you overcame adversity. I'm going to get there later, but how do you internalize that when you have real issues? Like health issues, and not just with you, but it's like a double whammy, a right and left kind of thing with you and then your wife, and then get back into the headspace of, hey, I'm going to go back into the workforce and focus on that. When you expect them to be, running Micron or a massive company like that, and then all of a sudden that goes away, and then you've got at the same time that's one disappointment. Then you've got the health concerns. That's another massive disappointment or challenge. Challenge you have to deal with.
Sure.
And then you get through all that, and then you get to the other side, and then now, bam, you're running SGH. Can you talk a little about the mindset there and how you dealt with all those adversities?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, it sounds better a couple of years later.
Yes.
It's a journey, as you say. And I think spirituality is one thing that helps is like, if you believe there's the broader purpose, and the whole is kind of the story and what you're going to learn about yourself in the story. I think in hindsight, I was just open to, okay, there's something here I got to kind of grow with, and I got to develop around. And so it's like, feeling sorry for yourself, which I certainly did for a while, can't be the end game though.
Yeah.
And so I think, being open to what's in front of you, and never really giving up. It's kind of something I got from both my parents. They divorced, and my dad had some tough times. My mother had some tough times. But one thing I got from them was resilience. It's like, man, you can stop living, or you can keep living, and you just got to keep it going. And so, like, yeah, it was kind of surreal though when my wife pulled in the driveway, and I've just resigned from a public company,
Right.
because of my health problem. They were great, and it was, unfortunately it happened, but I'm in the middle of this, and she goes, "Meet me in the driveway."
Oh man.
And she's like, I hate to dump this on you now, but I just found out, she just got back. And, so like at some point it was like, okay, wait a second. This is
Surrender.
so surreal that,
Yeah.
came on. The interesting part is, as bad as the first 6 months were, it was the best year of our lives.
Wonderful. That's so
Hey,
powerful.
first of all,
Yeah.
the two of us on the connectivity side,
Yeah.
I'm flying up to Boise every week,
Yeah.
coaching Pop Warner, coaching Little League baseball, soccer, and all that stuff. What
Mhm.
suffers? Your relationship with your wife. Now, it
100%.
wasn't horrible. It was just we weren't connected.
Yeah.
Boy, we got connected that year.
Yeah. Seriously.
So I think perseverance, resilience, and spirituality are, all of that collective. It was like, look, you got to absorb the punch, and you have to
Yeah.
feel sorry for yourself at some point, but you can't sit there, because that's never going to be the kind of a way out of something to a better path. And, I now look back and say, everything I tell my kids all the time, on the other side of things, on the other side of these tough situations, it's just gold. It's
It
just
really is.
beauty in life. It's just like, I look at life much differently now that I went through that, than some cocky MBA kid who's going to go run a semiconductor company.
Right. No, that's so powerful. So what you're saying almost is that well, in my language, in the investment world, the audience is going to resonate with this. There's no ROI feeling sorry for yourself or getting down or negative for no reason for an extended period of time. It's okay to feel that negativity for a little bit, but there's no ROI there. Instead, take that negativity, learn from it, understand there's that higher purpose, a spiritual component, or whatever use that as a lesson, and then redirect your energy or refocus your energy and find the next win, if you will. And that win for you was reconnecting with your wife and reconnecting with life and the important things in life, instead of just running after the next dollar, so to speak, or the next climbing the corporate ladder.
Yeah, and I think if you talk to people, there's a great. So I love this story that I had at business school. There was a CEO and chairman of American Express that came in and spoke at a case, and at the end of the case study, you get to ask 5 minutes of quick questions. And I actually decided to ask one. I said, "Hey, man, we're about to graduate from business school.
Yeah.
What would you tell us? Because you're at the end of your career. What would you tell us?" And he teared up, and he said, "I'd give it all back if I could just connect with my kids, because apparently it didn't work very well, and he was the absent father and all that stuff." And so, and that's my message too. Like, understand your motivations. I didn't necessarily tell you went through some of this stuff as pure as like, it's not about how much money we all make. Yeah, that's great and all that stuff, but like, it's what you do in life and what you kind of give.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, I was on the track, and you're building a family, and I don't hold myself, in bad light for being like this, but you get focused on like it.
Yeah.
And it should change over time. It does. And now I'm in my late 50s, and now I'd like doing this job. I'm trying to help individuals in my company develop and grow and do something wonderful. I'm not motivated by a paycheck in my job anymore. That doesn't really do it for me. It's really the opportunity and the challenges. And so that's true in other parts of my life. And I think that what you're saying is there is a higher purpose. And if you can get there earlier in life, I think you get richer earlier, and richer in an emotional sense, not a monetary sense.
Yeah, that is so powerful. So I think there's tremendous lessons there, and there's a ton of wisdom to unpack. I couldn't agree with you more, 100%. It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you will, right? So in order for you to get to the top needs in Maslow's hierarchy, you have to go through food and shelter, and then so on and so forth. Then you can get to self-actualization. So in this kind of world, I have my own version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's the spiritual growth, or the money growth, or the growth of a human from a professional standpoint, or in that lens of hierarchy of needs. At first, you worry about your getting basic necessities, bills paid, and then you have enough money where, okay, I want to have a little bit more. Then you have a little bit more. Then you have enough for retirement. Then you have enough for retirement. Then what? Right? Or you have enough to buy. You buy some toys, a house, or car, whatever it is you want to buy, a boat. Doesn't matter. And then eventually, you get to a certain point where it's no longer about the money. And then, because at that point, like rising up there, it's like, okay, I want to take. But then you realize you have this, like the top of that hierarchy, if you will. And this is just my own 2 cents. Is that giving. And that's where the joy comes from, whether it's philanthropy or if it's giving back, making an impact on others, so on and so forth. And that's really priceless.
No, I think like that's a great framework you just went through. I mean, because it's so true, because, and actually, I think it's really where a lot of people struggle.
Yeah.
Not that they don't want to give, but they get all that done. I've got great friends of mine from business school. I went through it for a while. I was like, okay, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
And
100%.
why?
Yeah.
Like, because it's so, I've got all these things I thought were important. And in your 50s, you turn around and go, I ain't so important.
Yeah.
And there's all these books about the second half of life and what have you. And I've got friends of mine who are really, really successful professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to this point in their life and they're like, oh, whoa, where do I go? But I think your point is, it's this purpose with in that framework you just went through. I think is a great way of putting it, because it really highlights, by the way, it's an opportunity to really have a huge impact, which is cool.
Yeah, really is cool. Yeah, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. The framework, because I struggled with that for a while earlier on in my career as well, where I was like, all right, I got that next shiny object, but then what? There's got to be something more here. So yeah, I love that. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here, Mark, but bear with me for a second if you don't mind. Someone just sent me this literally this past weekend, which I want to share with you and with the audience, which I thought was fantastic. They go, the secret to an extraordinary, abundant life, it's very simple. It's to give, right? So if you want friendship, you've got to first give friendship. If you want respect, you've got to give respect. If you want energy, you've got to give energy, i.e. exercise. If you want love, you've got to give love. If you want happiness, you've got to give happiness. If you want money, you've got to give value. So the more we give, the more we will receive in life. And that's kind of the more joy, happiness, all that kind of fun stuff too. but that just hit my inbox right before our call this past weekend. So, all right, we'll get back on track now. Thank you for all that.
Cool. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about your business at SGH and what you guys do?
Sure. So we're growing in terms of diversification in our business model. It started out as a memory company, which was the overlap with my experience at Micron, which is where I think Silver Lake, the private equity firm who brought me in, was thinking kind of, he knows the memory space and he also knows the LED space. So he'd be a good guy to come to help advise us and what have you. So they started out in memory and decided to diversify, and they bought a couple of computing assets prior to when I joined. But things weren't going very well. And I think part of it was a private equity kind of management organization.
Yeah.
That this is a tough business. And so it's not one that private equity would really kind of hone in on well. It was just, it really wasn't doing very well from a operating results perspective. And so we then bought Cree as another diversification play. So we've got 3 lines of business today: computing, memory, and LED. Not super synergistic in terms of what the business lines do, other than each one of them is focused on what I would call specialty or diverse niche market segments in a bigger pool, meaning we're not in iPhones, we're not in consumer electronics, so to speak. We're in these like small niches in each one of the businesses that we do stuff that's really kind of custom and customer engineered specific for their own application environment. And that's kind of our discipline, to stay in the swim lanes there. And if we get too close to commoditization, we move on to the next thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like it's currently like a holding company model. We buy companies, they're undervalued, we fix them and we make them better. And we've had 3 great examples. We just bought another one, or just announced the acquisition of another one early July. Stratus Technologies, the old fault tolerant compute company, to bolster our compute business. But yeah, we've got high performance computing. We're one of the largest hyperscalers in the world. We just built the largest AI supercomputer in the world with them.
Wow,
as an
congratulations.
example. And
that's cool.
We just do these custom projects that are very unique. And I think part of it is, I've seen commoditization. I'm on the board of Seagate. That's a tough hard drive. The hard drive business has been a tough commoditized business. I was in memory for a while. That was tough. And adding value is kind of a discipline at the company we're really focused on, from an engineering, support, design, all those services we can bundle together and be different, unique to our customer. As long as we don't stray from those values inside of what we deliver to our customers, I think it's going to be great. And the business has done well. We're up from when I joined, we're about $1.1 billion in revenue. Today we're $1.8 billion. Gross margins were 19% when I joined. Today they're 25, 26.
Well done.
EPS is done. So 2 years in, we're happy with the progress, and we have a lot of work in front of us. But think about us as a specialty provider of technology solutions in the compute, memory, and LED space, in these niche end segments.
Yeah, no, I love that. You're actually filling a good void there, because a lot of the bigger players, like you said, they're just more commodity products and they don't really offer that bespoke model, kind of like diving in deep. And
well, the reason why, and I can tell you from my experience with Micron, is when you're a semiconductor company, whether it's Intel, Broadcom, Nvidia, and the likes, Samsung, they operate on scale.
Yeah,
they put big bets. You build a fab and chips and $5-10 billion of a whack at a fab, and so they can't be concerned with $30 million projects, $50 million projects. Well, you look at our business, and we're kind of a summation of a bunch of those type of relationships. And yeah, you're exactly right. The company, that's not really interesting to big semiconductor companies, because they're thinking about, how do I shrink the next process node or what have you? How do I get a scale in a factory? They're not thinking about these small little custom projects. And it is a really nice place, a nice void we fill.
Yeah, so it's funny, after this, we'll talk about the private equity stuff, but I'll just share briefly. That's kind of the niche that I fill there too, where most of the big private equity shops are looking for EBITDA over X amount, and under X amount, between, let's say, 1 and 10 million, 1 and 20 million, 1 and 50, there's a kind of a void depending on the industry. And I go in there and try to fill that void, because there's just an empty playing field there, where the big guys aren't looking there. It's too small.
Well, you got to remember though, I mean, one of the best experiences I ever had was I got invited to spend a few days with the folks at Danaher when I was at Micron.
Oh, nice.
That's the way they started. They started buying 50, 60, $70 million businesses, and they, and then they grew and grew and grew, and then they did it well. They had a good recipe. But yeah, no, I think there's a place for that.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, wonderful. So I was going to ask you about the competitive advantages, but we just got that done. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Next question. What are some timeless lessons, Mark, you've learned along the way that we haven't covered yet that you'd like to share with the audience about life, business, spirituality, any direction you want to go? We'll take it all with a please and thank you.
I think being resilient, we did touch upon this earlier, but I just kind of restated in terms of all aspects. I mean, you never know what's coming. If you think
Right.
you do, that's probably, lesson number one is just be ready for what's unplanned and uncertain, and then be open to where it takes you. And then I think the other thing is that at the end of the day, I think humility is such a big attribute in business that can go a long way, but you can't measure it. Meaning, I think just being, again, humble in terms of, I see a lot of ego in business.
Yeah.
There's just no room for ego, because at the end of the day, we're all people.
Right.
You and I are engaged in a conversation. If we don't connect, then it's not going to be a great conversation. And
100%.
I think humility in terms of, business isn't perfect. You don't have all the answers. That's one of the best questions I ask in an interview is I try to, how do people deal with imperfect information and making decisions? Because that's what we get paid for.
100%.
So I think humility and resilience, because you're never going to have all the answers. Things are going to go wrong. That's just nature.
Yeah.
And then really being able to live in a world of imperfect information. Now, doesn't mean you can't find information to help you get smarter and make you make a better decision or along the journey, but it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be 1 + 1 = 2. You're going to get a lot of gray, and you're going to have to live in the world of gray. And I think that's they don't teach that. I mean, even when I was at business school, it's like, here are the equations, here's this, here's that. Now they started to do a little bit in the kind of philosophical piece of the curriculum, but it's just never as perfect as you'd like. So you have to be able to be uncomfortable living in uncertainty.
Yeah, no, I love that. So the amount of parallels there that are between your world in business and my world is just unbelievable in the market, with the stock market. I just published a book. It was #1 on Amazon for 6 weeks.
Wow.
Thanks. It's called Psychological Analysis. And it's the whole idea. There's fundamental and technical analysis are the two schools of thought for trading stocks or investing.
Sure.
So I introduced a third school called psychological analysis. And the humility part, that I love what you just said, you can't measure it. But it's so important, because just like in business, you can't fight the market in the stock market. You have to be humble. You have to make imperfect information. You have to be okay making mistakes and moving forward. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, I outlined just about a lot of that in my book. It's unbelievable, the parallels of being successful. It's almost like you don't get a six-pack by accident, right? But if you do the sit-ups, okay, then you'll get the flatter stomach. So, okay, I love that. So those are some timeless lessons. What about some timeless mistakes you see people make, and how do you avoid them?
Interesting. I think that for me, undervaluing, this is going to sound funny, but I think people sometimes don't value organization design and people.
Mm-hmm.
You get so excited about, I'm going to a company with this great widget that's going to solve the world's problem. But there's a lot of those companies that never get off the ground because they have the wrong people in the wrong seats. And so when I think about two things, when I think about, how I've thought about jobs in my life, it kind of go back to like, and I grew up around sports and I love athletics. So it's like, do you have the right lineup? Yeah. Do you have the right people in the right roles? Right. And I think a lot of people don't do that. And then I look back at some of the mistakes that I've made in my career. I didn't trust my instinct to act at the right time, meaning, there are people in seats that might be good for stage 1, but not stage 2 and 3. Right. And, having the conviction to make sure you always challenge that along the journey of building a company is, I never made a decision on someone too early. It was always too late. Oh, wow. That's really tough. And I think people they push it off. They hope. They don't want to deal with it. And so I now hold myself to a different standard there, which is, look, trust your instinct. Mm-hmm. And, don't overreact, but don't wait, because you're only pushing off the inevitable. And so I think around this people issue, I think is the one I see the most of, because like we said earlier, you're going to see problems in business. So I don't have any, I can't change that every business is going to go through challenges, but it's really the emphasis on the lineup, the team, the people, the motivation, the incentives, the challenge, the development, the emphasis on that, and then being kind of open-minded along the way to keep on reviewing that to make sure that who got you where you are they the right team to bring you to where you want to be. Right. And I think there's just a discipline to do that. I think a lot of companies, even big companies, I'm on the board of some big companies.
Yeah.
Cadence is like a $45 billion company and Seagate's 20 billion. These companies, I'm telling you, it's just, the people stuff, it needs to be a higher priority for all companies. And I think that what gets lost in that is stock price and all this excitement, whatever. And they don't stay true to what makes these great companies, and that's why our values at SGH is our first value, people first.
Yeah, agreed. So powerful. I love that. So yeah, making sure that you have the right people at the right roles at the right time, and when they evolve or the role evolves, to find someone else to make sure that they always stay in sync with what's actually happening. That's really, really, really great advice. Okay, next question. How do you handle risk, and what mistakes do you see, Mark, with respect to risk management, professionally or personally, or both, or spiritually, however you want to
go? Well, I think that's an interesting question, because you said, how do you handle it? And my interpretation as I was sitting here listening to you was, how do you live with it? How do you deal with it?
Yeah.
Because if you're not willing to take risks, you should be in the bond market, right? That's the risk. But no, I think you have to be able, it's really, my interpretation is, how do you get comfortable taking risks? Because you have to do it. I heard a statistic a while back that only 15% of the Fortune 500 30 years ago is still around.
Wow. I gotta look that up. That is amazing.
It's true. Think about it. And some of it's M&A, sure, but look, I grew up back east, as I told you earlier, and Xerox,
gone.
Kodak, Wang, Digital. I can name, these were all big tech success stories, right? And so it stunned me, and then all of a sudden it didn't stun me, because I started to go through and like, yeah, that's right, compact.
Right.
Look, digital equipment was going to take over IBM when I was back in Boston. They were right on they made that the VAX, and they were killing it. So I just think that if you're not taking risks and actually seeing around the corners while you're taking these risks, you're going to go out of business. So I think for me, it's not as much of a, I've got to be worried about risk. I gotta be worried if I'm not taking risks.
Smart.
That's how I look at it.
That's really powerful. That's really powerful. So a friend of mine jokes around. He goes, "You got to risk it for the biscuits." No risk, no reward, buddy. So that's how he words it. But okay, I love that. That's really, really good. So you're worried if you're not taking risk. Okay, let's keep going for risk for a second, then we'll move to the next question. There's different kinds of risk. There's calculated risk, and there's cowboy kind of risks. How do you, I guess, probability-wise, get rid of find the best risk versus reward kind of ratio ideas and trades or decisions, and how do you go with them?
Well, I think you start with going back to your values and your purpose. And that's, by the way, this is true in life and in business.
Right.
In business, they call it a mission or something like that, but it's still the same as going back to what you believe. Now, you can change that too, by the way.
Right.
Companies do change over time, but in the interim of what is our purpose? For example, I look at deals all the time. Okay, I look at investments or organic investments all the time. Yeah. And I go back to our purpose of, is this what we said was important? Right. So you talk about a cowboy approach, which is, come on in, let's take a look at everything. Yeah. Well, that's not very functional.
Right.
So there's values and purpose. Is it consistent with what you said was important? We do a lot of that work here up front in terms of our approach to the business, which is, are we clear on what we're trying to do?
Right.
Do we have the right values? Do we have the right people, as I said earlier? And then go back but the third component is process. I call it the 4 Ps, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
Purpose, people, process, and performance is the last piece. I can get to that in a little bit. But the 4 Ps, and that's not the 4 Ps in marketing. This is the 4 Ps, and to me, is how we run the business.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good.
And so the third one though is process. So once
Mhm.
you've aligned the risk around purpose and people, the process is, how do you evaluate the risk? I'm not saying when you're comfortable with risk, just take it blindly
Right.
and go, because everything you're gonna do, we just bought this company. It's
Yeah.
risky because
Yeah.
I haven't worked there for 20 years.
Right.
I'm trusting relationships that I've had for 3 months of due diligence. So
Right.
there's risk there. You have a process to
100%.
go through it, and then
Yeah.
you get comfortable with the risk through the process. It's aligned to what we think is important. I've got great people. They're great people. Try to fit the culture, evaluate how that would fit. And then you go through the process of aligning their business and understanding the business or in life, understanding what you're about to embrace on. And
Yeah.
like, what are you going to go do from your life purpose? And then what would you do to engage? For example, I was feeling kind of empty when I was in between, Micron getting healthy. What was I going to do? Well, I had to go out and talk to people. There was a process. I wanted to go talk to people who went through it.
Right.
So in the work side, there's a process to evaluate your risks.
Right.
And then the part that I think actually I should have said this earlier, the other life lesson that I think is true, and certainly in personal stuff, but really true in the world of just performance, is measuring. Accountability. Accountability is kind of like a 4-letter word in business.
Mhm.
And by the way, I think it's different. If you've been on great sports teams or been around good sports teams, accountability is, hey, we got a result. What did we learn? Not,
Right.
you got a result, let's fire somebody. That's not what I get up and get excited about. But that whole good to great concept is, what are you learning to make yourself better every day?
Right.
And that's true in life and it's true in business. Is if you didn't, you don't go 100%. You don't bat 1,000 in business. And so when things don't go right, what are you learning? What are you
Right.
taking away from it? And so that's where performance management to me is really helpful. Is like, hey, we said this happened. What did we learn?
So
And
powerful.
discipline
That
of
is
doing
so
that
powerful.
I don't think a lot of companies do that well.
That's so powerful.
But yet the great ones do.
Wow, Mark, that was like the proverbial cartoon where the piano falls in the cartoon character's head. That just fell on my head. That was fantastic. Because even with the markets where you're going to make mistakes and you're going to, some investments work, some don't. But okay, you took the loss, even if it's a small loss, move on, find the next one. But what people don't do is they don't focus on what they can learn from those mistakes, and so they don't repeat them again, or to diminish them, to mitigate those risks. That's so powerful. I love that. Well, thank you. That's fantastic. Okay, next question. What makes a great leader?
Empathy, humility, compassion, clarity. I don't think I'm the easiest, but I think I'm the fairest.
Nice.
People know where they stand, and I love people. I had to let someone go recently. We're going to lunch next week. We had a great relationship. I really care about him as a human being.
Right.
It wasn't working here.
Yeah.
But I could separate those two.
Right.
So clarity, again, I think, and then when I said empathy and compassion, people tend to forget in the business world, there's an IQ and EQ.
Yeah.
Everyone's focused on the IQ.
Right.
And we talked a lot about, our lives earlier and what have you, and motivations and purpose. Well, that all gets triggered by the EQ. We're like, our minds work with reward systems and pleasure and excitement, whatever. I think that the compassion of understanding what's going on for individuals in their lives, and what's making them tick, and if there's tough times, how can you be supportive? I mean, I'm more focused in life on the EQ connectivity of our team members, and that's true of my friendships too. Is like, let them deal with their IQ stuff, but like really connect with their EQ, and that's where compassion and empathy come in. Is really, and then the other thing, I think the last thing I would say is being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So when they look across the table, they know that you've had challenges and you've struggled, and you're not perfect, which is good back to the humility piece. I think all those are things that are different than, the 1970s definition of a leader, and how we thought about it then. I think the EQ piece of relationships and the connectivity and the compassion of people, and getting people to know that they're safe and they can perform and they can feel comfortable in their environment while being held accountable. And look, I don't think, it's not always going to work for everybody.
Right.
Okay, that can be just a step in their journey, but providing the leadership attributes that I just named, to me, has been something that I feel just allows for a better team environment. And at the end of the day, people first to work on a great team,
Right.
because teams make it all happen. I mean, that's the way it is in everything we do. And so I think those are the things I would highlight.
I love it. I got up to get this book. It's called Emotional Intelligence. As you're saying EQ, it rang a bell with me. So it's again, spot on. Very, very, I mean, fantastic advice. So that's what makes a great leader. I guess, what would be the best lesson you've learned about leadership and or obstacles about leadership that you'd like to share?
Best lesson. Well, I think maybe it's, if you don't mind, it's probably going to apply to life too, is
Please.
Don't try to be something you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And from a leadership perspective, you have to be authentic for people, because the EQ thing works both ways.
Yeah.
You have to be connected to someone else, but you're, in this case, we've got, at Micron, it was 35,000 people. Here at SGH, it's over 4,000 people. I'm asking them to connect with me so we can go do something wonderful.
Right.
And if it's not authentic and genuine, you're not going to get connectivity as an organization, as a team.
Yeah.
And so I think, sometimes I've seen leaders try to be things they're not, and it's kind of comes out, it's loud. And so I think being comfortable with who you are and what you're doing, and being authentic to that's really what you believe in, that's really who you're about. I think the best lesson is just being that genuine, authentic side of yourself, and being able to be available and connected to the mission at hand, whatever that might be. I think sometimes there's different motivations, and when they get to be less than authentic, I think that's when organizations kind of start to go by the wayside, or the culture starts to break down a little bit. You need everyone on the same page. You need everyone aligned with what you're doing. And if you're not authentic, and if you're not, kind of in the right place and not doing something that you're not really genuinely attracted to or aligned to, it can eventually come out. I think it's just so, and it's another way of saying, man, if you're not passionate, don't do it.
Interesting. So how do you handle, some people say be passionate about something and follow your passion, but it's not aligned with making money, and it's not aligned with helping you further your life or your career or whatever your intended goals is or are. So how do you, handle that quandary where somebody might be really passionate about something, but there's no ROI in that, but they're really good at something else, yet they're not passionate at it, but they can make a better living at it? What would you recommend, or how do you?
I mean, you're catching me at a point in my life that I would definitely say that's okay.
Nice.
Because we just talked about earlier, that your framework that you have.
Yeah.
Money kind of got lost in the middle of that framework because it was, because it's not that important, right? And so,
right.
That without a doubt, I would say follow your path. Now, no, I get it. By the way, there's practical things in life that you'd be under duress and stress. You can't not have an income, or you won't be able to provide for yourself. So there's it's not apples and oranges clear. But what I would say is, I do this with my kids: follow your passion.
Mm-hmm.
Because
so you're saying it depends where you are in that quote unquote, Adam's hierarchy of money, if you want.
I mean, sure.
If you get past that early stage of needing necessities and you've got enough in the bank and or you're okay, follow that passion and the money will come, or just forget the money. It's not even important.
Well, no, I think I think you hope for that, but honestly, I think, look, when you sound like you've done a lot of work on the EQ side of, and a lot of your background in terms of looking at the world is very consistent with what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
What percent of the world do you think is happy in their job?
My goodness. I would say less than 1%.
So do you think, I've heard 1, 5, whatever, but
I have no statistics
no
behind it, but right. 100%. Yeah, the minority.
Let's think about that. If it's 1 or 5%, probably is the most I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to be in that 5%?
100%.
Right. And so look, I understand it's not feasible for everybody to have this conversation about just follow your passion. Yeah. But if you have the ability to do that and be able to drive that, I mean, every great founder of a company has told that story where they didn't do it for the money.
Yeah.
The guy who started Starbucks, he didn't do it because he thought he was going to get people to pay $8 for a cup of coffee.
No.
He thought there was a better, experience. And you look at all these companies, along any who started and had a mission and purpose. It wasn't because of the money. And that's the big, that's the big leadership lesson there for people is like, don't do it for the wrong motivations.
Mm-hmm.
And so the passion thing is look, it could be anything. Now, here's the flip side of that. And especially when I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but like when I was growing up, there was a pretty cookie cutter approach to what success meant, the white picket fence, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at it in hindsight and like, man, you know what? I think if you have a purpose that you are so aligned to and you wake up to loving every day, I would take that over, the white picket fence, because, people's passions and their emotions are aligned to doing something wonderful. And normally now the money may follow, but that can't be the motivation. And so, yeah, like I said, that one, I'm pretty passionate about. I'm pretty clear on that one, which is, yeah, if you can follow your passion and interest. And look, I was the youngest of 6 in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a chance to go into professional football coaching as a grad, entry level stuff out of BC and whatever. And that wasn't what I was supposed to do.
Right.
I'm just telling you the truth, Stu. That was not what I was supposed to do.
Right.
Unspoken and spoken.
Yep.
And if I had someone who presented that to me as an option and their eyes were lighting up and you could feel it, I might nudge them that way.
Hit it. Yeah. Hit it. Yeah. No, that's really powerful. I love that. So, okay. Before I wrap up here, this has just been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for all of the time and the knowledge and the wisdom.
Of course.
Mark, your background, sales and marketing, and now you're running a publicly traded company. Your stock's extremely undervalued. You've got a 5 PE or somewhere in that low single digits. From one of my friends who's runs a ton of money, his one rule with investing is find a CEO that comes from a sales background because they're going to get it, and just period. So I'm just curious, because the people side of it and everything that you've discussed, how does that background help you and or hurt you as being a CEO of a publicly traded company, and or does that impact your decision for recruiting people or hiring people or interacting with people professionally with respect to their backgrounds, if they have a sales background or don't have a sales background? Is that important? Yes or no? And how does that factor into your overall thinking?
Yeah, when you say sales, I think a customer.
Okay.
And as another good example of, I think, why we were able to turn Micron around was, they looked at it as capacity and bits and bytes. And I'm like, hey, man, let's go talk to the customers and see what they need, And so I think customer knowledge, market knowledge is really, really important. And to your point about the sales thing, like when I talk about our business to investors, I'm like, I know what, you guys have I know how you look at a business. Let me tell you about what you want.
Right.
Revenue growth off the charts, gross margin expansion off the charts, EPS growth off the charts in the first 2 years. Okay. And the language they want it, my investors want to hear. And if we have a new management team and all that stuff, that's secondary, and they like that, but and where I'm taking the company. But I also think the one thing that they're going to hear from me is what I talked about NCR.
Yeah.
And I talked about Micron, 2 great technology companies that have been around for a long time. And they weren't necessarily successful day one. Micron's best years are the last 10,
right?
Not the first 30,
right?
And which is kind of interesting. That doesn't always happen in business. And what I would say is thinking for the long term. I'm at a place in my career. I'm not trying to sell stock tomorrow. Actually, I bought more recently. I'm a believer. I'm like Warren Buffett. If you're going to bet on someone, bet on yourself.
Right.
I'm a believer in the company, and so. That all stems from thinking about a broader horizon of where we're going to be in 5-10 years. If you look at great technology companies, like Samsung's a great example. They literally have a 50-year plan.
That's awesome.
Now, it might not be perfect, but like we get tied up in the capital markets and what's happening every 90 days.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that works. I think you have to think long-term and build something foundational that's going to last through the cycles. And I look at our business right now and, we're in a pretty good place, and the multiples will come, but remember, this was a company that wasn't performing 2 years ago. So investors are trying to get their arms around, how much can they trust, how much they know about me and the team. And, look, I think the results are fantastic, and the stock is up still 60-70% since we joined. And so I look, and the world
doing a great job.
it is what it is, you know, and we'll keep our heads down, executing and deliver.
Yeah, no, I can go into the details here of how great it is. Double-digit earnings growth and sales growth, and you've got 33% estimates for earnings annualized this year versus last year growth. I mean, I don't want to, necessarily do all that right now, but I mean, just hats off to you, fantastic. So I love that fact of look at the customer, think from the customer's point of view, opposed to just yours. That's a really powerful point. And then going back to the previous part about the don't do it for the money, do it to do good, and then the money supposedly comes, or it will come. The passion part of it. Michael Jordan didn't shoot to say, oh, I just made $100 grand because I shot it. He wants to shoot a really good ball, and then the money will come. But if you focus on shooting really well and just executing to the best of your powers or abilities, somehow, again, higher power, whatever it is that you want to say, it just works out for most of the time.
You said something that's really interesting. You brought, the Michael Jordan story up. If you think about peak performance in life, there's this classic thing that every sports psychologist talks about.
Yeah.
Don't focus on the result, focus on the process.
Right.
The process will take you to a great result, but people who focus on the results, they won't get there because they're too enamored with what that might mean versus, great people, great discipline, good focus, good execution, and do all these things, that build this great company. Focus on the process piece. Don't focus, and that's true in sports. You can't focus on the ball going into or the money you're going to make.
Right.
You got to focus on the skill set, the development, the confidence, and all that. And that will take. So, and I talk about this with my kids all the time. Don't focus on the result.
Yeah.
Focus on the process. Brad Stevens, the coach of the Celtics, great story. He goes, they stopped talking about winning and losing. Just let's have a great practice today. Let's get better today. So
that's great. I love that. Okay, final question. What advice would you give to your 30-year-old self and or young, anyone in their 20s or 30s?
Well, we talked about a lot of it because I've had some life-changing stuff that has gone on in my life that I've reflected.
Is the answer watch the show? Like watch this episode?
Yeah, honestly, I think maybe is be prepared that things will come at you that you don't anticipate.
Right.
And trust that if you stay true to your values, things will work out. It's never a straight line. It's never perfect. But if you can kind of navigate through the curveballs that come at you, there's goodness on the other side of it.
I love that. That's really awesome. All right, beautiful. Mark, thank you so much. Smart Global Holdings, SGH. The website is smartm.com and the ticker symbol is SGH. Is that all correct?
Yeah, we also, there's a new website with the nomenclature SGH. It's called www.sghcorp.com.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Mark. And hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Hey, great. Really appreciate it. Fun conversation.
Thank you.